Guys, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while since I've posted, but this one is for the grade 9s. In this section, we're going to be talking about weathering, and in future videos, we'll be talking about the different courses of the river. We're going to be talking about erosion and some other cool geography stuff. If you find this video is helpful, please make sure to hit the like. Don't forget to subscribe. Tell all your friends about it because sharing is caring. Yeah, let's get started. So, first off, what is weathering? Weathering is the breaking down of rocks into smaller pieces, right? A lot of people think weathering and erosion are the same thing, but they pretty much work hand in hand. Weathering is when something is broken down, erosion is when it moves from one place to another, and deposition is where it finally lays itself to rest. So, weathering is any kind of process where rocks are broken down. And there are three types of weathering. There is physical or mechanical weathering, there is chemical weathering, and finally, there is biological weathering. Today, we're going to be talking about the three different types of weathering. I'm going to be showing you some examples on the weathering and how these rocks are changed. And we're going to be talking about why we care about weathering. The first kind of weathering is called mechanical or physical weathering. And this kind of weathering happens because of repeated heating and cooling of rocks. So, over a long time, when the sun burns down in very cold conditions, these rocks start to break down. And there are quite a few types of mechanical and physical weathering, which we're going to be discussing now. First off, we have exfoliation. Exfoliation is when massive boulders, like granite, are subjected to heating and cooling. This causes the rock to stress and eventually it starts to peel, which means that these rocks pretty much shed the outer layer. Usually, next to these boulders, you will find large, flaky pieces of rock from the pieces that peeled off. And what is left behind is a big, smooth boulder. All right. So when you think about it, exfoliation is like when you exfoliate your skin. If you don't know anything about skincare, it's when you take a rough soap and rub it against your skin, pretty much peeling away the dead skin layers. So with rocks, it's pretty similar. The heating and cooling causes the dead skin to fall off the rock, leaving behind a nice smooth layer. So that's what we call exfoliation. Next up, we have something called granular disintegration. And just like the name states, granular, grain by grain, disintegration is basically disappearing. So, this is when rocks, over long periods of time caused by weather, break apart literally grain by grain. How do we know this has happened? Well, usually around those rocks, you'll find a very coarse, grainy sand. So, almost like little bits of rock. And that's pretty straightforward. Next up, we have frost shattering, which is also sometimes known as freeze thaw. Pretty much what happens is sometimes a rock will get a tiny crack in it. And when it rains, water will go into the crack. Now, overnight, if there are freezing temperatures, this water will start to freeze and become ice. And if you know anything about ice, is that when water becomes ice, it expands, it gets bigger. And so as it freezes, it makes the rock crack a little bit wider. Then the next day it melts, it rains again, falls up a little bit more, and then overnight it again freezes and expands. And so this continues to happen until eventually the rock literally breaks into two. It's amazing what a little bit of water and a little bit of freezing can do to a giant rock. The last kind of physical and mechanical weathering is called joint cracking. Now, when I think of joint cracking, I think of literally clicking my knuckles. But basically, what this is when rocks move from under the earth to above it. So, newly surfaced rocks go through high pressure under the ground, and as it emerges, it goes into a low pressure zone, which means that everything the pressure was holding together, as it releases up to the surface, it starts to break apart. And we know that joint cracking has taken place because a lot of the cracks are vertical. They literally go downwards. Now, before you start thinking, wait, rocks don't just pop up. These rocks take hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe millions of years to go from under the earth to above the earth. And so joint cracking takes a very long time. But like I said earlier, if you see vertical cracks, it means that is joint cracking. And that's it for physical and mechanical weathering. Next up, we have chemical weathering. Chemical weathering is when the makeup of the rock is chemically altered. So while physical weathering is when temperature acts upon it, chemical weathering's main factor is oxygen. So when oxygen reacts with something in a rock, it causes the rock to change. There are many different types of chemical weathering, but we are going to be talking about three. And the first thing that you do need to know is that chemical weathering generally takes place faster in warm, moist, humid areas. The first kind of chemical weathering is oxidation. Oxidation happens when oxygen reacts with iron minerals in the rock. Another word for oxidation is actually rusting. So when oxygen mixes with iron, so for example, in a car, if you scratch the paint off your car and the oxygen reacts with that metal or iron bits in the car, it makes it go rusty. So an orangey brownish color. And the same thing happens with oxidation. It causes the rock to turn an orangey reddish color. The second kind is called carbonation. Carbonation is when carbon dioxide reacts with oxygen, and this causes it to become a weak carbonic acid. And these carbonic acids make a white layer on top of a rock. So, if you ever look at statues, for example, that have gone through carbonation, it has a milky white appearance to it. Third and lastly is hydration. Could happen in two ways. Firstly, both of these involve salt and water. So when water mixes with salt in a rock, it can have two effects. The first effect is that it could absorb the water, causing the rock to swell up and then shatter into bits. Or it could have the opposite. The salt can be evaporated along with the water in a rock. Yes, surprisingly, rocks have water in it, even though they seem really dry. And when it does that, these beautiful crystals sort of appear on the front of the rock or the surface of the rock. So you might be walking around and go, ooh, shiny rock, and think it's something valuable, but all that it really is hydration. And last but not least, we have biological weathering. Biological weathering is when any living thing assists in the breakdown of rocks. This could be trees growing through rocks, causing the rocks to break apart. It could be humans or animals walking or even burrowing to make homes. And it could also be fungus, lichens, etc., growing on a rock. All of those things can, over a very long period of time, cause a rock to break down. So, for example, when humans walk in the same direction over and over again, it forms natural pathways because our feet are literally breaking up the little rocks and causing the grass to die. So, biological weathering is literally any time when a living thing causes a rock to break down. And that, ladies and gentlemen, are the three different kinds of weathering. If you learned something today or if you found this really easy, don't forget to like, maybe leave a comment, subscribe, and tell all your friends. Good luck for any exams coming up, and we'll see you later.